Hey guys, Sam from Manfa's Makes. Happy Saturday! Thank you for spending some of your weekend with me. I truly do appreciate it. Welcome back to my returners and hi, any newbies. If you are new here, on a Saturday and a Sunday, I have a slightly different segment on this channel, and it is where I read you stories from this book, Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. I normally do 2 or 3 stories at a time. I apologise in advance. I can feel a sneeze. So if I sneeze, I do apologise. So yes, I read you 2 or 3 of these stories on a Saturday and 2 or 3 of these stories on a Sunday. Quick little disclaimer. It is a super old book. It was written probably hundreds of years ago. Just because I'm reading the words on the page doesn't mean that I agree with any themes or ideas or how can I put it? I'm not agreeing to anything. I'm just reading you the words on the page. Let's put it like that. Some of them are a little bit dark. Some of them are a little bit grim. You know, Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. And sometimes I really don't understand the meaning behind the story either. But they are super interesting. And I thought I would share this on a weekend for you. So, shall we crack on? We are starting today on story 36, and this is The Wishing Table, The Gold Ass, and The Cudgel in the Sack. There once... See, I've messed up already. Let me start again. There was once upon a time a tailor who had 3 sons and only 1 goat. But as the goat supported the whole of them with her milk, she was obliged to have good food and to be taken every day to pasture. The sons, therefore, did this in turn. Once the eldest took her to the churchyard, where the finest herbs were to be found, and let her eat and run about there. At night, when it was time to go home, he asked, "Goat, have you had enough?" The goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh, meh." "Come home then," said the youth, and took hold of the cord round her neck, led her into the stable, and tied her up securely. "Well," said the old tailor, "has the goat had as much food as she should?" "Oh," answered the son, "she has eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." But the father wished to see for himself, and went down to the stable, stroked the dear animal, and asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" The goat answered, "Why should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no food, so went without. Meh, meh." "What do I hear?" cried the tailor, and ran upstairs and said to the youth, "Hullo, you liar! You said the goat had had enough and have let her hunger." And in his anger he took the yard measure from the wall and drove him out with blows. Next day it was the turn of the second son, who looked out for a place along the garden hedge where nothing but good herbs grew, and the goat cleared them all off. At night, when he wanted to go home, he asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" The goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh, meh." "Come home then," said the youth, and led her home, and tied her up in the stable. "Well," said the old tailor, "has the goat had as much food as she should?" "Oh," answered the son, "she has eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." The tailor would not rely on this, but went down to the stable and said, "Goat, have you had enough?" The goat answered, "Why should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no food, so went without. Meh, meh." "The godless wretch," cried the tailor, "to let such a good animal hunger," and he ran up and drove the youth outside with the yard measure. Now came the turn of the third son, who wanted to do the thing well, and sought out some bushes with the finest leaves, and let the goat devour them. In the evening, when he wanted to go home, he asked, "Goat, have you had enough?" The goat answered, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh, meh." "Come home then," said the youth, and led her into the stable and tied her up. "Well," said the old tailor, "has the goat had a proper amount of food?" "She has eaten so much, not a leaf more she'll touch." The tailor did not trust to that, but went down and asked, "Goat, have you had enough?" The wicked beast answered, "Why should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no leaves, so went without. Meh, meh." "Oh, the brood of liars!" cried the tailor, "each as wicked and forgetful of his duty as the other. You shall no longer make a fool of me." And quite beside himself with anger, he ran upstairs and belaboured the poor young fellow so vigorously with the yard measure that he sprang out of the house. The old tailor was now alone with his goat. Next morning he went down into the stable, caressed the goat, and said, "Come, my dear little animal, I will take you to feed myself." He took her by the rope and led her to green hedges and amongst milfoil and whatever else goats like to eat. "There you may for once eat to your heart's content," said he to her, and let her browse till evening. Then he asked, "Goat, are you satisfied?" She replied, "I have eaten so much, not a leaf more I'll touch. Meh, meh." "Come home then," said the tailor, and led her into the stable and tied her fast. When he was going away, he turned round again and said, "Well, are you satisfied for once?" But the goat did not behave the better to him, and cried, "Why should I be satisfied? Among the graves I leapt about, and found no leaves, so went without. Meh, meh." When the tailor heard that, he was shocked, and saw clearly that he had driven away his 3 sons without cause. "Wait, you ungrateful creature," cried he. "It is not enough to throw you out. I will mark you so that you will no more dare to show yourself amongst honest tailors." In great haste he ran upstairs, fetched his razor, lathered the goat's head, and shaved her as clean as the palm of his hand. And as the yard measure would have been too good for her, he brought the horsewhip and gave her such cuts with it that she ran away in violent haste. When the tailor was thus left quite alone in his house, he fell into great grief, and would gladly have had his sons back again, but no one knew where they had gone. The eldest had apprenticed himself to a carpenter, and learnt industriously and indefatigably. And when the time came for him to go travelling, his master presented him with a little table which had no particular appearance and was made of common wood, but it had one good property. If anyone set it out and said, "Little table, set yourself," the good little table was at once covered with a clean little cloth, and a plate was there, and a knife and fork beside it, and dishes with boiled meats and roasted meats, as many as there was room for, and a great glass of red wine shone so that it made the heart glad. The young journeyman thought, "With this you have enough for your whole life," and went joyously about the world, and never troubled himself at all whether an inn was good or bad, or if anything was to be found in it or not. When it suited him, he did not enter an inn at all, but either on the plain, or in a wood, a meadow, or wherever he fancied, he took his little table off his back, set it down before him, and said, "Set yourself," and then everything appeared that his heart desired. At length he took it into his head to go back to his father, whose anger would now be appeased, and who would now willingly receive him with his wishing table. It came to pass that on his way home one evening he came to an inn which was filled with guests. They bade him welcome and invited him to sit and eat with them, for otherwise he would have difficulty in getting anything. "No," answered the carpenter, "I will not take the few bites out of your mouths. Rather than that, you shall be my guests." They laughed and thought he was jesting with them. He, however, placed his wooden table in the middle of the room and said, "Little table, set yourself." Instantly it was covered with food so good that the host could never have procured it, and the smell of it ascended pleasantly to the nostrils of the guests. "Go ahead, dear friend," said the carpenter, and when the guests saw that he meant it, did not need to be asked twice, but drew near, pulled out their knives, and attacked it valiantly. And what surprised them the most was that when a dish became empty, a full one instantly took its place of its own accord. The innkeeper stood in one corner and watched the affair. He did not at all know what to say, but thought, "You could easily find a use for such a cook as that in your kitchen." Bear with me just one sec. Sorry guys, my laptop nearly switched off. I was running out of battery. Let me go back a little bit and continue. So, "Go ahead, dear friend," said the carpenter, and when the guests saw that he meant it, did not need to be asked twice, but drew near, pulled out their knives, and attacked it valiantly. And what surprised them the most was that when a dish became empty, a full one instantly took its place of its own accord. The innkeeper stood in one corner and watched the affair. He did not at all know what to say, but thought, "You could easily find a use for such a cook as that in your kitchen." The carpenter and his comrades made merry until late into the night. At length they lay down to sleep, and the young apprentice also went to bed, and set his magic table against the wall. The host's thoughts, however, let him have no rest. It occurred to him that there was a little old table in his storeroom which looked just like the apprentice's, and he brought it out quite softly and exchanged it for the wishing table. Next morning the carpenter paid for his bed, took up his table, never thinking that he had got a false one, and went his way. At midday he reached his father, who received him with great joy. "Well, my dear son, what have you learnt?" said he. "Father, I have become a carpenter." "A good trade," replied the old man, "but what have you brought back with you from your apprenticeship?" "Father, the best thing which I have brought back with me is this little table." The tailor inspected it on all sides and said, "You did not make a masterpiece when you made that. It is a bad old table." "But it is a table which furnishes itself," replied the son. "When I set it out and tell it to cover itself, the most beautiful dishes stand on it, and a wine also, which gladdens the heart. Just invite all our relations and friends. They shall refresh and enjoy themselves for once, for the table will give them all they require." When the company was assembled, he put his table in the middle of the room and said, "Little table, set yourself." But the little table did not stir itself, and remained just as bare as any other table which did not understand language. Then the poor apprentice became aware that his table had been changed, and was ashamed at having to stand there like a liar. The relations, however, mocked him, and were forced to go home without having eaten or drunk. The father brought out his patches again and went on tailoring, but the son went to work with a master in the craft. The second son had gone to a miller, and had apprenticed himself to him. When his years were over, the master said, "As you have conducted yourself so well, I will give you an ass of a peculiar kind, which neither draws a cart nor carries a sack." "What use is he then?" said the young apprentice. "He lets gold drop from his mouth," answered the miller. "If you set him on a cloth and say 'Bricklebrit,' the good animal will drop gold pieces for you." "That is a fine thing," said the apprentice, and thanked the master, and went out into the world. When he had need of gold, he had only to say "Bricklebrit" to his ass, and it rained gold pieces, and he had nothing to do but pick them off the ground. Wherever he went, the best of everything was good enough for him, and the dearer the better, for he always had a full purse. When he had looked about the world for some time, he thought, "You must seek out your father. If you go to him with the gold ass, he will forget his anger and receive you well." It came to pass that he came to the same inn where his brother's table had been exchanged. He led his ass by the bridle, and the host was about to take the animal from him and tie him up, but the young apprentice said, "Don't trouble yourself. I will take my grey horse into the stable and tie him up myself too, for I must know where he stands." This struck the host as odd, and he thought that a man who was forced to look after his ass himself could not have much to spend. But when the stranger put his hand in his pocket and brought out 2 golden pieces, and said he was to buy something good for him, the host opened his eyes wide, and ran and sought out the best fare he could muster. After dinner the guest asked what he owed. The host did not see why he should not double the reckoning, and said the apprentice must give 2 more gold pieces. He felt in his pocket, but his gold was just at an end. "Wait an instant, sir host," said he, "I will go and fetch some money." But he took the tablecloth with him. The host could not imagine what this could mean, and being curious, stole after him, and as the guest bolted the stable door, he peeped through a hole left by a knot in the wood. The stranger spread out the cloth under the animal and cried "Bricklebrit," and immediately the beast began to let gold pieces fall, so that it fairly rained down money on the ground. "Eh, my word," said the host, "ducats are quickly coined there. A purse like that can't be wrong." The guest paid his score and went to bed, but in the night the host stole down into the stable, led away the master of the mint, and tied up another ass in his place. Early next morning the apprentice travelled away with his ass, and thought that he had his gold ass. At midday he reached his father, who rejoiced to see him again, and gladly took him in. "What have you made of yourself, my son?" asked the old man. "A miller, dear father," he answered. "What have you brought back with you from your travels?" "Nothing else but an ass." "There are asses enough here," said the father. "I would rather have had a good goat." "Yes," replied the son, "but it is no common ass, but a gold ass. When I say Bricklebrit, the good beast opens its mouth and drops a whole sheet full of gold pieces. Just summon all our relations, and I will make them rich folks." "That suits me well," said the tailor, "for then I shall have no need to torment myself any longer with the needle," and ran out himself and called the relations together. As soon as they were assembled, the miller bade them make way, spread out his cloth, and brought the ass into the room. "Now watch," said he, and cried "Bricklebrit," but no gold pieces fell, and it was clear that the animal knew nothing of the art, for every ass does not attain such perfection. Then the poor miller made a frown, saw that he was betrayed, and begged pardon of the relatives, who went home as poor as they came. There was no help for it. The old man had to take to his needle once more, and the youth hired himself to a miller. The third brother had apprenticed himself to a turner, and as created and as creating by lathe is skilled labour, he was the longest in learning. His brothers, however, told him in a letter how badly things had gone with them, and how the innkeeper had cheated them of their beautiful wishing gifts on the last evening before they reached home. When the turner had served his time and had to set out on his travels, as he had conducted himself so well, his master presented him with a sack and said, "There is a cudgel in it." "I can put on the sack," said he, "and it may be of good service to me, but why should the cudgel be in it? It only makes it heavy." "I will tell you why," replied the master. "If anyone has done anything to injure you, do but say, 'Out of the sack, Cudgel,' and the cudgel will leap forth among the people and play such a dance on their backs that they will not be able to stir or move for a week, and it will not leave off until you say, 'Into the sack, Cudgel.'" The apprentice thanked him and put the sack on his back, and when anyone came too near him and wished to attack him, he said, "Out of the sack, Cudgel," and instantly the cudgel sprang out and beat the coat or the jacket of one after the other right on their backs, and never stopped until it had stripped it off them, and it was done so quickly that before anyone was aware it was already his own turn. In the evening the young turner reached the inn where his brothers had been cheated. He laid his sack on the table before him and began to talk of all the wonderful things which he had seen in the world. "Yes," said he, "people may easily find a table which will cover itself, a gold ass, and things of that kind, extremely good things, which I by no means despise, but these are nothing in comparison with the treasure which I have won for myself and am carrying about with me here in my sack." The innkeeper pricked up his ears. "What in the world can that be?" thought he. "The sack must be filled with nothing but jewels. I ought to get them cheap too, for all good things go in threes." When it was time for sleep, the guest stretched himself on the bench and laid his sack beneath him for a pillow. When the innkeeper thought his guest was lying in a sound sleep, he went to him and pushed and pulled quite gently and carefully at the sack to see if he could possibly draw it away and lay another in its place. The turner had, however, been waiting for this for a long time, and now, just as the innkeeper was about to give a hearty tug, he cried, "Out of the sack, Cudgel!" Instantly the little cudgel came forth and fell on the innkeeper and gave him a sound thrashing. The host cried for mercy, but the louder he cried, so much more heavily the cudgel beat the time on his back, until at length he fell to the ground exhausted. Then the turner said, "If you do not give back the table which covers itself and the gold ass, the dance shall begin afresh." "Oh no," cried the host quite humbly, "I will gladly produce everything, only make the accursed goblin creep back into the sack." "Then," said the apprentice, "I will let mercy take the place of justice, but beware of getting into mischief again." So he cried, "Into the sack, Cudgel," and let him have rest. Next morning the turner went home to his father with the wishing table and the gold ass. The tailor rejoiced when he saw him once more, and asked him likewise what he had learned in foreign parts. "Dear father," said he, "I have become a turner." "A skilled trade," said the father. "What have you brought back with you from your travels?" "A precious thing, dear father," replied the son, "a cudgel in the sack." "What?" cried the father, "a cudgel? That's worth your trouble indeed. From every tree you can cut yourself one." "But not one like this, dear father. If I say 'Out of the sack, Cudgel,' the cudgel springs out and leads anyone who means ill with me a weary dance, and never stops until he lies on the ground and prays for fair weather. Look, with this cudgel I have got back the wishing table and the gold ass which the thievish innkeeper took away from my brothers. Now let them both be sent for, and invite all our kinsmen. I will give them food and drink, and will fill their pockets with gold too." The old tailor would not quite believe it, but nevertheless got the relatives together. Then the turner spread a cloth in the room and led in the gold ass, and said to his brother, "Now, dear brother, speak to him." The miller said Bricklebrit, and instantly the gold pieces fell down on the cloth like a thunder shower, and the ass did not stop until every one of them had so much that he could carry no more. I can see in your face that you would also like to be there. Then the turner brought the little table and said, "Now, dear brother, speak to it." And scarcely had the carpenter said, "Table, set yourself," than it was spread and amply covered with the most exquisite dishes. Then such a meal took place as the good tailor had never yet known in his house, and the whole party of kinsmen stayed together till far in the night, and were all merry and glad. The tailor locked away needle and thread, yard measure and flat iron in a cupboard, and lived with his 3 sons in joy and splendour. What, however, has become of the goat who was to blame for the tailor driving out his 3 sons? That I will tell you. She was ashamed that she had a bald head and ran to a fox's hole and crept into it. When the fox came home, he was met by two great eyes shining out of the darkness and was terrified and ran away. A bear met him, and as the fox looked quite disturbed, he said, "What is the matter with you, brother fox? Why do you look like that?" "Ah," answered Redcoat, "a fierce beast is in my cave and stared at me with its fiery eyes." "We will soon drive him out," said the bear, and went with him to the cave and looked in. But when he saw the fiery eyes, fear seized on him likewise. He would have nothing to do with the furious beast and took to his heels. The bee met him, and as she saw that he was ill at ease, she said, "Bear, you are really making a very pitiful face. What has become of all your gaiety?" "It is all very well for you to talk," replied the bear. "A furious beast with staring eyes is in Redcoat's house, and we can't drive him out." The bee said, "Bear, I pity you. I am a poor weak creature whom you would not turn aside to look at, but still I believe I can help you." She flew into the fox's cave, lighted on the goat's smoothly shorn head, and stung her so violently that she sprang up crying, "Meh, meh," and ran forth into the world as if mad, and to this hour no one knows where she has gone. There we go, guys. Okay, so the second story is story 37, and it's called Thumbling. There was once a poor peasant who sat in the evening by the hearth and poked the fire, and his wife sat spinning. Then said he, "How sad it is that we have no children. With us all is so quiet, and in other houses it is noisy and lively." "Yes," replied the wife, and sighed. "Even if we had only one, and it were quite small, and only as big as a thumb, I should be quite satisfied, and we would still love it with all our hearts." Now it so happened that the woman fell ill, and after 7 months gave birth to a child that was perfect in all its limbs, but no longer than a thumb. Then said they, "It is as we wished it to be, and it shall be our dear child." And because of its size they called it Thumbling. They fed it plenty of food, and the child did not grow taller, and remained as it had been at the first. Nevertheless, it looked sensibly out of its eyes, and soon showed itself to be a wise and nimble creature, for everything it did turned out well. One day the peasant was getting ready to go into the forest to cut wood, when he said, as if to himself, "How I wish that there was any one who could bring the cart to me." "Oh, father," cried Thumbling, "I will soon bring the cart. Rely on that. It shall be in the forest at the appointed time." The man smiled and said, "How can that be done? You are far too small to lead the horse by the reins." "That's of no consequence, father. If my mother will only harness it, I shall sit in the horse's ear and call out to him how he is to go." "Well," answered the man, "for once we will try it." When the time came, the mother harnessed the horse and placed Thumbling in its ear, and then the little creature cried, "Gee up, gee up." Then it went quite properly as if with its master, and the cart went the right way into the forest. It so happened that just as he was turning a corner and the little one was crying, "Gee up," 2 strange men came towards him. "My word," said one of them, "what is this? There is a cart coming, and a driver is calling to the horse, and still he is not to be seen." "That can't be right," said the other. "We will follow the cart and see where it stops." The cart, however, drove right into the forest and exactly to the place where the wood had been cut. When Thumbling saw his father, he cried to him, "See, father, here I am with the cart. Now take me down." The father got hold of the horse with his left hand, and with the right took his little son out of the ear. Thumbling sat down quite merrily on a straw, but when the 2 strange men saw him, they did not know what to say for astonishment. Then one of them took the other aside and said, "Listen, the little fellow would make our fortune if we exhibited him in a large town for money. We will buy him." They went to the peasant and said, "Sell us the little man. He shall be well treated with us." "No," replied the father, "he is the apple of my eye, and all the money in the world cannot buy him from me." Thumbling, however, when he heard of the bargain, had crept up the folds of his father's coat, placed himself on his shoulder, and whispered in his ear, "Father, do give me away. I will soon come back again." Then the father sold him to the 2 men for a handsome bit of money. "Where will you sit?" they said to him. "Oh, just set me on the rim of your hat, and then I can walk backwards and forwards and look at the country and still not fall down." They did as he wished, and when Thumbling had taken leave of his father, they went away with him. They walked until it was dusk, and then the little fellow said, "Do take me down. I want to come down." The man took off his hat and put the little fellow on the ground by the wayside, and he leapt and crept about a little between the sods, and then he suddenly slipped into a mouse hole which he had spied. "Good evening, gentlemen. Just go home without me," he cried to them, and mocked them. They ran and stuck their sticks into the mouse hole, but it was all lost labour. Thumbling crept still further in, and as it soon became quite dark, they were forced to go home with their vexation and their empty purses. When Thumbling saw that they were gone, he crept back out of the subterranean passage. "It is so dangerous to walk on the ground in the dark," said he. "How easily a neck or a leg is broken." Fortunately, he knocked against an empty snail shell. "Thank God," said he, "in that I can pass the night in safety," and got into it. Not long afterwards, when he was just going to sleep, he heard two men go by, and one of them was saying, "How shall we contrive to get hold of the rich pastor's silver and gold?" "I could tell you that," cried Thumbling, interrupting them. "What was that?" said one of the thieves in fright. "I heard someone speaking." They stood still listening, and Thumbling spoke again and said, "Take me with you, and I'll help you." "But where are you?" "Just look on the ground and observe from where my voice comes," he replied. There the thieves at length found him and lifted him up. "You little imp, how will you help us?" they said. "A great deal," said he. "I will creep into the pastor's room through the iron bars and will hand out to you whatever you want to have." "Come then," they said, "and we will see what you can do." When they got to the pastor's house, Thumbling crept into the room, but instantly cried out with all his might, "Do you want to have everything that is here?" The thieves were alarmed and said, "But do speak softly so as not to waken anyone." Thumbling, however, behaved as if he had not understood this, and cried again, "What do you want? Do you want to have everything that is here?" The cook, who slept in the next room, heard this and sat up in bed and listened. The thieves, however, had in their fright run some distance away, but at last they took courage and thought, "The little rascal wants to mock us." They came back and whispered to him, "Come, be serious and reach something out to us." Then Thumbling again cried as loudly as he could, "I really will give you everything you put your hands in." The maid, who was listening, heard this quite distinctly and jumped out of bed and rushed to the door. The thieves took flight and ran as if the wild huntsman were behind them, but as the maid could not see anything, she went to light a candle. When she came back with it, Thumbling, unperceived, fled to the barn, and the maid, after she examined every corner and found nothing, lay down in her bed again and believed that after all she had only been dreaming with open eyes and ears. Thumbling had climbed up among the hay and found a beautiful place to sleep in. There he intended to rest until day and then go home again to his parents. But he had other things to go through. Truly there is much affliction and misery in this world. When day dawned, the maid arose from her bed to feed the cows. Her first walk was into the barn, where she laid hold of an armful of hay, and precisely that very one in which poor Thumbling was lying asleep. He, however, was sleeping so soundly that he was aware of nothing, and did not awake until he was in the mouth of the cow, who had picked him up with the hay. "Ah, heavens!" cried he, "how have I got into the mill?" But he soon discovered where he was. Then it was necessary to be careful not to let himself go between the teeth and be dismembered, but he was nevertheless forced to slip down into the stomach with the hay. "In this little room the windows are forgotten," said he, "and no sun shines in, neither will a candle be brought." His quarters were especially unpleasing to him, and the worst was more and more hay was always coming in by the door, and the space grew less and less. Then at length, in his anguish, he cried as loud as he could, "Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder!" The maid was just milking the cow, and when she heard someone speaking and saw no one, and perceived that it was the same voice that she had heard in the night, she was so terrified that she slipped off her stool and spilled the milk. She ran in great haste to her master and said, "Oh heavens, pastor, the cow has been speaking." "You are mad," replied the pastor, but he went himself to the barn to see what was there. Hardly, however, had he set his foot inside when Thumbling again cried, "Bring me no more fodder! Bring me no more fodder!" Then the pastor himself was alarmed, and thought that an evil spirit had gone into the cow and ordered her to be killed. She was killed, but the stomach, in which Thumbling was thrown on the rubbish pile. Thumbling had great difficulty in working his way to the surface. However, he succeeded, but just as he was going to thrust his head out, a new misfortune occurred. A hungry wolf ran over and swallowed the whole stomach in one gulp. Thumbling did not lose courage. "Perhaps," thought he, "the wolf will listen to what I have got to say," and he called to him from his stomach, "Dear wolf, I know of a magnificent feast for you." "Where is it?" said the wolf. In such and such a house you must creep into it through the kitchen sink, and will find cakes and bacon and sausages and as much of them as you can eat. And he described to him exactly his father's house. The wolf did not need to be told this twice, squeezed himself in at night through the sink, and ate to his heart's content in the larder. When he had eaten his fill, he wanted to go out again, but he had become so big that he could not go out by the same way. Thumbling had reckoned on this, and now began to make a violent noise in the wolf's body, and raged and screamed as loudly as he could. "Will you be quiet?" said the wolf. "You will wake up the people." "Nonsense," replied the little fellow. "You have eaten your fill, and I will make merry likewise," and began once more to scream with all his strength. At last his father and mother were aroused by it, and ran to the room and looked in through the opening in the door. When they saw that a wolf was inside, they ran away, and the husband fetched his axe, and the wife the scythe. "Stay behind," said the man when they entered the room. "When I have given him a blow, if he is not killed by it, you must cut him down and hew his body to pieces." Then Thumbling heard his parents' voices and cried, "Dear father, I am here. I am in the wolf's body." Said the father, full of joy, "Thank God, our dear child has found us again," and bade the woman take away her scythe that Thumbling might not be hurt with it. After that he raised his arm and struck the wolf such a blow on his head that he fell down dead, and then they got knives and scissors and cut his body open and drew the little fellow out. "Ah," said the father, "what sorrow we have gone through for your sake." "Yes, father, I have gone about the world a great deal. Thank heaven I breathe fresh air again." "Where have you been then?" "Ah, father, I have been in a mouse's hole, in a cow's stomach, and then in a wolf's. Now I will stay with you." "And we will not sell you again. No, not for all the riches in the world," said his parents, and they embraced and kissed their dear Thumbling. They gave him food and drink, and had some new clothes made for him, for his own had been spoiled on his journey. So there we go, guys. That's our 2 stories for today. And actually this video is much longer than I anticipated. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much. I really do enjoy reading new stories, and I hope you enjoy listening to them. I will now let you carry on with your fabulous Saturday, and I hope you have a lot of fun this weekend. I love you all so much. I will see you soon. So as always, stay safe, be kind, look after one another, get some good quality time in with your loved ones, and get some good quality crafty time. And I shall see you in the next one tomorrow for more stories or around the YouTube streets. Love you guys. Bye.